Yeah, we're putting aside world politics for a second and going entirely somewhere else. A quiet life of simplicity, churned butter, and literal horsepower. And trust me, this hypothetical isn't just about giggles. It's also seriously fascinating when you think about Trump as a socio-political phenomenon. Buckle up, wait, scratch that, grab the reins, because here we go.
This video is purely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real-life individuals, including public figures, is not intended to impersonate, offend, or target any individual or group. We respect copyright laws and have no intention of infringing on any rights. Enjoy.
Alright, so picture this. Donald J. Trump, born into a devout Amish family, trading his towering ego for towering cornfields. From day one, Amish Trump would be immersed in a world where status isn't measured by money or power, but by how tightly you stick to the Ordnung, the community's all-encompassing handbook of do's and don'ts. It's a world where self-promotion is frowned upon, making this the ultimate test for someone whose name is practically a brand. But here's a twist. Amish Trump would still find a way to stand out. Forget gold-plated apartments. His claim to fame might be building the biggest barn in Lancaster County, complete with the toughest thatched roof you've ever seen. The community would gather for a barn raising, and of course, in Amish Trump style, he'd ensure his structure stands taller than everyone else's. Because, well, some habits die hard. Nobody builds better barns than us, he'd declare while carefully aligning the beams. As for young Donald's entrepreneurial streak, that wouldn't disappear either. Instead of selling condos, he'd likely be wheeling and dealing in livestock, butter, and baked goods. Picture this. Trump's farm becomes the first to successfully trade 5 cows for a dozen sheep, revolutionizing the livestock world. It's all about deals. Even the sheep believe in this farm, he'd say, probably as he shakes hands with neighbors and seals said deals. And then there's his ego. How would it survive without modern-day mirrors or photos? Simple, through word of mouth. Trump would rely on his neighbors, spreading tales of his legendary productivity. They wouldn't be likes on Instagram, but they'd still gratify his inner mogul. Amish Donald might not have the flashiness of Manhattan, but he'd make waves as a community icon, one quilt pattern and hand-built milk crate at a time. The real question, though, how does someone like Trump function under rules where breaking pride is as important as baking bread? Answer, with a lot of tension and more than a few loopholes, but we'll get into that later. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Trump, the politician, cast through an Amish lens. Historically, the Amish aren't known for casting ballots in national elections, but on rare occasions, they've stepped into the political arena to protect their way of life. Would Amish Trump be the guy to rally the plain people into action? You bet. Imagine this, a Trump campaign from the back of a buggy. Instead of campaign buses covered in slogans, we'd have banners reading, "Make Buggies Great Again," draped over wooden wagons. Forget the multimedia blitzes. His campaign strategy would rely on good old-fashioned word of mouth and personal connections. Listen, he'd say to a gathering of wagons circling in a field, we're going to bring back real farming values, tremendous crops, tremendous cows, everyone agrees. Amish Trump speeches might skip the glowing Jumbotron visuals, but they'd absolutely be packed with the same fire and flourish. But what kind of platform would Amish Trump run on? Picture this, a pledge to outlaw complicated machinery. We need plain tools, only plain tools, he'd shout, getting enthusiastic nods from nearby farmers. And don't think he'd stop there. Electricity itself might face a rhetorical beating, with Trump outlining plans to ban those fancy solar panels the English keep trying to sell us. And what about foreign policy? Amish style? Oh, it'd be an entirely local affair. Sure, Trump's us versus them attitude towards trade would adapt, this time targeting neighboring communities. Imagine him waging a peaceful trade war. Hickory Grove wouldn't stand a chance in a pumpkin barter standoff with Plainview. But there's a deep irony here too. Amish communities are grounded in pacifism, meaning Trump's military build-up rhetoric would have no place in this narrative. Instead, he might redirect his competitive nature toward crop rotations. No one rotates fields better than us. The corn will win, folks. It's all about the corn. Here's the kicker. Amish Trump wouldn't just be about sticking to the old ways. He'd have a knack for turning tradition into strategy, rallying his community with promises of growth while still adhering, mostly, to the Ordnung. Would he win over the Amish electorate? Maybe. After all, they do value humility, but they've also got a weakness for someone who can plow straight through a problem and deliver, even if it's in a buggy. It's no secret that Trump loves business more than most people love cake. And while the Amish lifestyle is steeped in tradition, entrepreneurship isn't exactly off the table. It just needs to align with values of simplicity and service to the community. Cue Amish Trump, who would absolutely become the tycoon of all things locally crafted and ethically sourced. First up, Buggies. Forget the plain Jane models we're used to seeing on Amish country roads. Trump buggies would be a cut above the rest. Folks, our buggies are the smoothest, the strongest, built with only the finest oak wood from Lancaster's premier forests. Amish Trump might proclaim to neighbors gathered at the local barn. These buggies wouldn't just have good wheels, they'd have tremendous wheels. Hand-stretched seats, polished brass accents, maybe even subtle pinstriping. You can almost hear Trump pitching his premium buggy line at the Sunday market. And of course, each one would come with a gold-plated plaque stating, "A Trump Buggy Original." Marketing genius. That's one thing Amish Trump would never leave behind. But oh, he wouldn't stop there. Where there's wood and craftsmanship, there's furniture to be made. Picture this, an entire line of Amish-made tables, benches and rocking chairs with a Trump legacy stamp on the bottom. Each chair would be sold with a lifetime warranty, because if the craftsmanship doesn't last forever, you can call me Mitteldorf, his potential Amish alter ego name, maybe. Imagine Trump taking orders for his now famous handcrafted dining tables, each one large enough to fit your entire family, a chicken dinner spread, and all the whispers of approval from your neighbors. And butter. Oh, the butter. If there's one thing that could trump Trump Tower, it's Trump gold churns. Butter so silky, Trump would insist it's unlike any butter the Amish, or the English, have ever seen. He wouldn't just stop at selling it locally. No, Trump would create an export system specifically catered to the English. Picture a velvet-lined butter churn engraved with his family crest being sold as a collector's item. Could it actually work? Well, considering Trump's knack for marketing, probably. But it's not all smooth sailing in Amish Donald's entrepreneurial utopia. Taking on too many ventures runs the risk of, make no mistake, ruffling the Ordnung's feathers. Balancing profit and adherence to tradition would be the high-wire act of his legacy as an Amish mogul. Too flashy? Risk being shunned? Too plain? Well, we all know Amish Trump couldn't settle for that. At the end of the day, though, Amish Trump would likely solidify his reputation with business moves that straddle innovation and tradition. Whether it's world-class butter, buggies, or beds, his entrepreneurial spirit wouldn't be contained. Everyone in the community might not love his methods, but there's no doubt Donald Trump would leave his buggy tracks across the market forever. Now, this is where the real drama kicks in. Trump and the Ordnung were destined to clash. The Amish Ordnung, for the uninitiated, is a strict framework of rules that govern everything, from how to dress, to how to act, to how many buttons you're allowed on a jacket. It's all about humility, harmony, and community. Sounds great, right? But for someone like Trump, whose entire personality revolves around individuality and standing out, it's a recipe for a collision course. Picture the first time Trump gets called out during a bishop's meeting for wearing a slightly shinier button. It's just brass. How shiny could it possibly be? He fumes but rallies, accusing the Ordnung of being too rigid. Sad, these rules are holding us back while our neighbors in Hickory Grove are thriving. The other bishops nod politely, unsure how to respond to such bluster. And what about the famously restrained Amish attitude to self-promotion? For Amish Trump, this would be torture. No pictures, no name-brand endorsements on hand-carved signs. Nothing. Can you imagine Trump trying to inspire the local community to call his barn the biggest and best in town, only to have a local elder calmly remind him, "It's not about your barn, it's about our togetherness"? His response: "What's good for my barn is good for the community." It's peak Trump logic, modified for plain living. But the real kicker, how would he handle giving up things like golf courses and modern luxuries? Golf for Trump is not just a hobby, it's a way of life. Replacing golf with fieldwork would likely inspire some not very humble comments such as, "Plowing 18 rows in the summer sun is probably harder than scoring a birdie, but look, nobody works harder than me." At the very least, he'd find a way to tune his competitive streak towards farming. "Our milk yield this season, more cows, better milk, everybody says so." While there might be a noble attempt there, Ordnung's philosophy of humility would make such prideful announcements a hard sell to his peers. And remember the Amish lack of mirrors as a means of discouraging vanity. That would really sting. Imagine Trump having to measure his appearance based purely on feedback from Melania and barn builder Bob. "They're saying my beard looks great today, folks. Best beard in Lancaster County." Ultimately, though, the tension between Trump and the Ordnung wouldn't just be about conflict. It'd be a battle of adaptation. Could Trump learn to dial it back? Maybe. Or would he weave some of his large-than-life energy into the fabric of Amish culture in an unexpected way? Most likely, Trump's biggest strength, even in conflict, has always been his ability to pivot. Would Ordnung rules remain the same with him around? Definitely not. But Amish Trump wouldn't just steamroll tradition. Over time, he'd negotiate his way into evolving its boundaries, tremendously of course. Harmony might not come naturally for Amish Trump, but come harvest season, even the Ordnung might admit, his field rows are darn near perfect. Alright folks, time to talk about the Trump family. Adapting to Amish life would be quite the transformation for a clan accustomed to high-profile real estate deals and glittering galas. But hey, when the Ordnung calls, even the Trumps would have to answer. In their own way. First up is Ivanka. Forget luxury fashion lines, she'd become the Amish community's unofficial style trendsetter. Picture her designing plain yet powerful dresses. Minimalist patterns, but with just enough flair to stand out at Sunday gatherings, because blending in isn't exactly a Trump trait. Of course, these outfits would all feature Trump's signature, literally stitched discreetly into the hemline. Eric and Don Jr., well, they'd probably handle fieldwork with the same competitive streak they bring to boardrooms. Who can plow the most perfectly straight rows? Who can stack the most hay? Sibling rivalries meet farm efficiency. They'd turn every task into an unofficial competition. And you know there'd be arguments. Don, your row looks like a zigzag. That's just the terrain, Eric. All fun and games until one of them tilts the buggy, trying to out-harvest the other. Melania, on the other hand, would master the art of Amish baking. Imagine her at a community bake sale with pies so flawless they belong in a museum. "It is made with love," she'd say with her signature calm elegance. And honestly, she'd probably outsell every other baker, prompting whispers of, "How does she make them so good?" The answer, of course, would likely still remain her mystery. And then there's Barron. The youngest Trump might find Amish life the hardest to adjust to. You know, no smartphones, no video games. But he wouldn't go down without a fight. Picture him trying to sneak modern contraband, like, say, a battery-powered lawnmower, only to have Donald reprimand him while secretly considering the efficiency of motorized farming tools. Eventually, though, the Trumps might find an unexpected charm in communal life. Family dinners wouldn't be about business deals, but about homegrown vegetables and barn gossip. They'd have buggy outings, not to the country club, but to church meetings. And of course, Donald would insist their buggy be the biggest and fastest in the district. "Our family buggy doesn't just win races, it wins hearts," he'd boast. The real plot twist is how the Trumps might redefine Amish family values, blending community life with their signature ambition. One thing's for sure, underneath all the modesty, this family would definitely still find a way to shine. Oh boy, imagine Trump delivering a Sunday sermon. This is where Amish Donald would truly shine, or at least try to. Church services are serious, spiritual, and centered on humility. Three things that don't exactly scream Donald Trump, but as always, he'd bring his own twist. Today, folks, we're talking about Noah. Incredible guy, right? Great builder. Built the Ark, a project even bigger than Trump Tower. He'd sprinkle in Bible verses, but wouldn't be able to resist including one of his classic improvisations. Now, some people said Noah couldn't build it, said it was impossible, but did he listen? He just got the job done. That's what I call tremendous faith. And the congregation? They'd probably look at each other, torn between admiration and confusion, because while the sermon might veer off script, there'd still be passion behind it. "The meek shall inherit the earth," he'd declare, but listen folks, only if they're willing to work for it. No meekness without good barns. At some point though, these sermons might morph into motivational pep talks. Humility is important. But you know what's equally important? Winning at life. Are we the best community? Yes we are, and we're staying that way. He'd somehow manage to work in community crop statistics or hay bale counts, metrics that would definitely turn heads mid-service. But there's a softer side we might see here too. Trump has always valued loyalty and family, traits the Amish emphasize deeply. Over time, his sermons could reflect those values. He'd speak about the strength of family bonds, the importance of working together in times of need, and how faith drives community resilience. When we work together, folks, there's nothing we can't churn, plow, or build. And wouldn't you know it, Trump might actually find a rhythm that resonates. The sermons that started as a mix of self-promotion and theatrics might transform into heartfelt calls to action, encouraging unity, perseverance, and faith. Imagine Trump getting emotional during a harvest season sermon, thanking the community for their hard work during tough conditions and promising next year's crops will be even better. By the end of it, some might still roll their eyes, but others could come away inspired. And isn't that the Trump effect in a nutshell? Love him or raise an eyebrow at him, somehow he always leaves an impact. Even in Amish plainness, he might preach his way into the Ordnung, or at least carve out a role as the Sunday service speaker everyone secretly looks forward to hearing. When it comes to church leadership, Donald Trump as an Amish elder or deacon would be nothing short of a fascinating experiment. Amish Trump would naturally gravitate toward a prominent position in the church, not out of vanity, well, maybe a little, but because leadership is practically in his DNA. Picture this. Trump sitting across from a group of seasoned Amish elders, pitching himself not as just another deacon, but as the one who could make the congregation great again. he'd outline ambitious yet unorthodox plans for community-wide initiatives, like expanding services to include barn-enhancing sermons, or introducing a rotating schedule for hymn leaders to keep things fresh and exciting. Would the elders be impressed? Maybe. Would they be overwhelmed? Almost certainly, but it wouldn't stop there. His sermons, already charismatic if unconventional, would start to weave in plans for church efficiency. Communion taking too long. Trump introduces a streamlined method using handmade wooden goblets for speed. Fundraisers falling flat. He'd organize church bake-offs with guaranteed Trump-approved methods to win over the English market. Of course, traditional Amish leadership is deeply tied to humility and quiet service, which is where things get tricky. Trump's natural showmanship might clash with the elders' reserved demeanor. Imagine a heated meeting at the bishop's house where Trump suggests replacing traditional scripture readings with parables about negotiation. We can't just talk about the prodigal son, he'd argue. We need the proactive son, the guy who makes deals, folks. Still, his energy and enthusiasm, however polarizing, could spark a fresh wave of engagement from younger community members. They'd admire his boldness while secretly chuckling at his self-proclaimed title of chief deacon in charge. Over time, Amish Trump might find himself mediating between conservative elders and progressive youth, becoming the symbol of a community in transition. His leadership's ultimate legacy? A congregation that's both bemused and energized, with new hymn books featuring slightly fancier calligraphy, courtesy of Trump. Because the old ones were fine, but not tremendous. Now, disputes may be rare in Amish communities, but when they arise, say over farmland boundaries or buggy parking spots, they're handled with quiet diplomacy and grace. Enter Amish Trump, who would take this process and flip it on its head while still attempting to honor the Ordnung. Well, his interpretation of it. For a minor land dispute, Trump wouldn't just suggest dividing the field in half. Oh no, he'd organize a community vote after pitching ambitious ideas for maximizing the space. We're going to create the best hayfield, folks, he'd announce. Tremendous grass. Cows are going to love it, and everyone will come out a winner. But of course, his deal would include some dramatic twist, like guaranteeing that one side gets extra grazing rights in exchange for helping him harvest next season. Buggy parking disagreements? Amish Trump would introduce an entirely new system, branding it the Buggy Allocation Zone. He'd paint a few subtle but strategically positioned oak planks to mark parking spaces, then charge a modest fee for the betterment of the community. Naturally, half the congregation would be skeptical, but local blacksmiths providing the extra materials. Huge fans. And what about more complicated disputes, like a neighbor unhappy with someone's fence placement? Trump would step in, not as a dictator, but as a self-proclaimed expert negotiator. Look, we're going to fix this. You want the fence here, they want it there. It's not a big deal. We'll move it 3 feet this way, and I'll personally lend you my prize-winning horse to help plow the field. Win-win. Somehow everyone would walk away scratching their heads and oddly satisfied. Despite his reluctance to follow the Amish tradition of sitting quietly and listening during negotiations, Trump's unique approach might ironically help the community appreciate the value of compromise. Love it or hate it, Amish Trump wouldn't just resolve disputes, he'd turn them into opportunities to remind everyone that peace is important. But at the end of the day, so is innovation. Because, as he'd no doubt remind everyone, you can't keep the peace without tremendous progress. Alright, so what have we learned? If Donald Trump were Amish, we'd see a fascinating rebirth of his defining traits. Some would clash with Ordnung, others would blend in ways no one expected. And perhaps even Trump would find peace in the simple life. But Amish Trump, he'd find a way to make it huge anyway. The greatest barns, buggies, and butter you've ever seen. Leave your thoughts below. Could Trump thrive as Donald of Plainview? Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more remixed realities like this one. Because hey, every hypothetical could be the start of something astonishing. Until next time, stay savvy.